head out now to the great state of Montana, where Tim Sheehy is on his way to beating Jon Tester and helping to take control of the Senate for Republicans. He is leading, but I'm sure that the battleground state is still going to be quite a battle. Jon Tester will not go down without a fight. And before he even says it, I bet Chuck Schumer is going to be pouring maybe even 100 million or more. I bet hundreds of millions into this race because it may well determine control of the United States Senate. Am I right about that, future Senator Sheehy? Is Chuck Schumer spending money unlike we've ever seen in the history of the state of Montana right now?
Yeah, this will be the most expensive election in American history per vote, Clay. So it will be call it 600,000 votes that turn out here in Montana, and really, for a Senate election like ours, let's say 20 to 30,000 decide it. 250 to $300 million will be spent in this state for 30,000 swing votes. So this will be the most expensive election in American history per vote. And as you well know, Clay, it's not our side setting that spending pace. It is Chuck Schumer, George Soros, and the dark money groups that make Jon Tester the number one recipient of lobbyist money in the entire nation. He gets more money from these out-of-state dark money groups than any other candidate in the whole country, Congress, Senate, gubernatorial, or presidential. He's bought and paid for.
How nasty has it been for you, a guy who was not in politics before? Has it been nastier than you expected? I know we still got 70 days roughly till Election Day, so the nastiness can still get dialed up. But you were with us at the RNC. You're a normal guy. You're walking around with your wife. You got a family. What has it been like for you to suddenly find yourself in the midst of really a race that may well determine Senate control? What's it been like for you personally?
Well, obviously, it's a challenge no matter which way you slice it. My wife and I are both combat veterans. She's a Marine Corps officer, veteran of Afghanistan. I'm a SEAL officer, veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan. Of course, as many folks remember, yesterday was the 3-year anniversary of our disastrous pullout of Kabul and the bombing at Abbey Gate, which of course brought all this into focus and caused me to run in the first place. So, although the personal attacks and the attacks on my business, they've savaged my business, Bridger Aerospace, a great Montana success story, founded from scratch in my barn, created hundreds of jobs. They've just been assaulting that business, from getting former employees to sue us to going after our stock, just going after our employees and our contracts and everything. It's been tough to watch the pain that this has caused other people. I mean, personally, my wife and I, we're war veterans. I used to get shot at by real bullets for a living, not fake liberal TV bullets. So, at the end of the day, the impact on me and my family, we signed up for this. But it's been really, really disgusting to see how they've gone after our employees, our businesses, our charitable giving, and just waged a smear campaign that is just so disappointing to see, coming from someone who, he's been in office for 30 years, state Senate, U.S. Senate. Jon Tester should have a lot to talk about to Montana about all the good he's done in the decades he's been in office. But instead, he's spending all of Chuck Schumer's money just spreading lies and negative ads out there. And frankly, it's backfiring because our latest polls show us up, 5 points, 6 points. We're not going to trust those polls. We've got to run like we're behind all the way to Election Day, and we will. But the messaging is clear that the Democrats are scared. They don't have a policy platform to run on, so they got to run on character assassination, and it's backfiring on them.
Okay, this is really important for people out there who may not be paying attention. Chuck Schumer's not hiding what he wants to do if Kamala Harris somehow gets into office and if he has the majority or a tie-breaking vote that would allow him to have a default majority. They're talking about doing away with the filibuster. That would mean that basically we have hugely wide swings. They may talk about redoing the Supreme Court. Potentially adding Senate seats for a place like the District of Columbia, which would give them 2 Senate seats additional every election cycle. I know Montanans, it matters a great deal to them who represents them. But if you're listening to us right now nationwide, your race could be the bulwark that keeps things from falling completely into insanity in the event that Democrats manage to win the 2024 presidential race.
You hit the nail on the head, Clay, and thank you for mentioning that, because that's going, unfortunately, under the radar for a lot of folks, is that this is not just a Montana U.S. Senate seat. This Senate seat will determine control of the Senate and, frankly, the structure of our constitutional republic for a generation, because just like you said, Chuck Schumer has been very vocal about his plan. He has not hidden it. He wants to eliminate the legislative filibuster, add 2 more states, D.C. and Puerto Rico. That's 4 more Democrat senators. And once they have that permanent majority built in, they want to expand the Supreme Court and dilute the conservative influence of that court. That right there spells basically the end to our constitutional checks and balances. And when Donald Trump wins this fall, he needs a Senate to get anything done, from justice appointees to the cabinet nominees to not getting impeached. And if he doesn't win, God forbid, and we have a Harris-Waltz big government socialist agenda, the Senate is the firewall to stop all that craziness from happening. That's the firewall to stop another $5 trillion of taxes thrown on us in the first year. That's the firewall for 16% inflation and printing money. It's a firewall against more crazy foreign policy misadventures that are going to send our young men and women overseas. And it's a firewall against, common sense things like boys and girls sports. So we have to win the Senate either way. Whether we win the White House or not, we have to have the U.S. Senate to keep our constitutional republic intact.
Jon Tester right now, who you're running against, is trying to claim that he is a moderate. We were just talking about Kamala Harris saying, we need a border wall all of a sudden. He's trying to pretend that he's an independent voice and not a rubber stamp for the Democrat majority, which he has been with Chuck Schumer. For people out there that are seeing these ads in Montana and might be thinking to themselves, well, of course I'm voting Trump because I think Trump is winning. I've seen the polling by 25 or more points right now in Montana. It's not going to be close. Okay. But they say, I'll vote for Tester. He's independent. I'm independent. Montana's filled with a lot of independent people. How much of a lie is it that Jon Tester is an independent voice?
I mean, that's why we call him Two-Face Tester. He goes to D.C., votes with Elizabeth Warren and Chuck Schumer, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden every single time. Then he comes home to Montana and puts on, his Carhartt jacket, and all of a sudden he's a Bible-thumping, gun-toting, border security Republican. It's literally laughable. But unfortunately, as you said, he's very talented at it. And to be honest, if you got a shred of acting talent and $200 million of Democrat dark money ad spend, you can convince a lot of people of a lot of things. And that's exactly how he survived for 30 years in our political landscape in this state, is having a very well-funded charade that encourages independent-minded Montanans to consider him as an independent voice, which, as you correctly pointed out, he absolutely is not. Over the past 3.5 years, Kamala Harris has broken more ties than any other vice president in the history of our country in the U.S. Senate. And that is due to one person, Jon Tester. Because Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin had the moral courage to stand up whenever things were getting really crazy and say, listen, I may be a Democrat, but this is just crazy. I'm not going to support this. Whereas, obviously, Jon Tester never once took the time to do that. Never once stood up and said, I'm not going to stand for this craziness.
You mentioned you and your wife are both military veterans. Yesterday was the anniversary, unfortunately, of 13 people who lost their lives as part of the disgraceful exit from Afghanistan. As a veteran, when 3 years have passed since that happened, to you, does that disqualify being involved in that alone, disqualify Kamala Harris from being commander-in-chief?
Well, listen, disqualifying is up to the voters, but for me personally as a veteran, absolutely. I wouldn't fall into a paper bag. What Harris and Biden did was such a disgrace, not just to our nation and to our allies, but to the entire history of our armed forces. How do you tell a generation like my wife and I, we joined up right after 9/11, and we knew for a fact we were going to war. It wasn't a question. We weren't joining for free college or to see the world. We were joining knowing for a fact we were going to the desert, we were going to war. And we answered our nation's call. And then after multiple combat deployments, losing friends, my brothers were friends, were veterans, her best friend. Our whole friend circle, as is typically the case these days, we're all combat veterans. And to see years of our lives sacrificed, lives of our friends who lost legs, who lost arms, who didn't come home at all, to see that just washed away, and to this day, no accountability. No secretaries have been fired. No generals have been fired. Nothing has happened. And yet the Taliban are conducting parades with $80 billion of our equipment. They're flying our helicopters around. They're executing our allies. It's a disgrace, and she should be held accountable. She will be held accountable at the ballot box this fall, but we got to go down the line. There's a lot of other people buried in that bureaucracy. We got to get out of there because they've led America into a corner, and we need a new generation of leaders to save this country.
Talking to Tim Sheehy, last question for you. First of all, how can people go to help you? You can give your website out. But second part of this, there's been a mass movement in much of the country since 2020 COVID happened. I think Montana has been made over, maybe you can tell me better than anybody almost, has been made over with new residents to a degree, given the population, the likes of which we aren't seeing very many places. Has that made Montana redder based on your analysis? How would you assess the COVID impact on this Senate race for the first time since COVID?
No, that's a great question, Clay. And obviously every state's been affected differently. Montana has gotten redder. Bottom line is the cows have come home. We call them cows, California, Oregon, Washington. The folks fleeing the crazy leftist regimes in those states that have no common sense, that are not putting their citizens first. The conservatives in those states, of which there are many, as you well know, Seattle and Portland and San Francisco take the statewide politics left, but the truth is, in the rural counties in those states, they are conservative. Those folks are fleeing. We call them political refugees. They're saying, I'm done with this craziness, and I'm coming to Montana. I'm coming to Idaho. I'm going to live where freedom is still cherished. And those people, about 2 to 1, 2.5 to 1, we estimate in our polling, that have come into our state are political refugees fleeing the crazy policies of the deep blue states they're coming from. So we are seeing an uptick. The reddest elections in Montana have been our last 2 elections, and this one will be no different. Montana's have made it very, very clear. They want freedom and liberty put first. They want our Constitution as our top priority for our elected officials, and they want to save this country.
Tim Sheehy, how can people support you, either from Montana or elsewhere, if they're listening to you and they say, I like the cut of this guy's jib, I want to help give him some money?
Yeah, well, timformt.com. I've never run for any office before in my life, not even student council or city council. This is the first time I've run because I'm so worried about the future of this country. Timformt.com, timformt.com. If you're from Montana, follow us on socials, get the word out. If you're not from Montana, the best thing you can do is help us out. Donate $5, $10, $50, whatever it is. If you're in a deep blue state, your money's not going to do any good there. Send it to Montana. If you're in a deep red state, you've probably already won. Senate here. This is the most important political race in the nation behind the White House. We've got to win this race because we got to flip the Senate.
Amen. Tim Sheehy, tim4mt.com. Let me know how we can help. Buck and I are happy to come up and do anything we can to help make sure you get elected.
All right, let's make it happen. Thanks, Clay.
Appreciate you. I'm not kidding. That is a monstrously important Senate race that a lot of you probably are paying attention, but I think a lot of you probably not. It will, I believe, control who wins the United States Senate, what happens in Montana. There are other races out there that are seismically important as well. We'll talk a bit about those. We'll take some more of your calls. But in the meantime, a reminder, new movie rolling out in theaters this weekend, Reagan, starring Dennis Quaid as the president himself. The story of Ronald Reagan's life and his second career as a governor, then president, and a man determined to remove communism from Europe and reduce its impact the world over. Producers timed the movie just right when so many Americans are contemplating what a great president is capable of and what their motivations are. You'll see highlights of President Reagan's speeches and witness the reenactment of his actions and conversations. Great movie for history buffs like me, for fans of President Reagan out there. I hope you can all check it out this coming weekend. Get your tickets now at reaganmovie.com. That's reaganmovie.com.